The biggest mistake I see beginners make with paintings when they're working from dark to light is not going dark enough on the underpainting. So I thought I'd do a complete video showing exactly how I paint this section of the tiger going from dark to light. I'm using alkyd oil paints, but this would work just the same in acrylics too. So I've made up a dark out of some brown and black and ultramarine blue, and I've put in the darkest section of the tiger's ear, and now I've made a lighter colour, so I'm painting in that lighter section that you can see now. Now this is still much darker than the final part is going to be, because I need to overlap the lighter areas on top of it. And that's a critical part, because the beginners usually go too light on this underlayer. So when it comes time to actually put the lighter layer on top, you can't see it, it doesn't show up, because you need to have a dark layer underneath. Now the alkyd oils, because they've got that alkyd medium already in there, so it's similar to having a liquid in there, they dry by the next day. So what I generally do with my paintings, I do this dark section first, perhaps put a little bit of detail in there, wet and wet, especially if I want that detail to be soft looking. Then I let it dry, then I put the real details on top. So you can see here I've made an even lighter colour, but it's still much darker than I want that final area to be. Everything is still wet in this section, so you can see I can put some very fine lights in now, and it's just given a subtle appearance to it. It's soft because I'm painting wet and wet. That underlayer is still purely wet. You can see that the upper strokes are blending into it, so it's giving you a softness. So it's usually a good idea, if you want it to be soft in appearance, that's when you want to do it wet and wet. When you want a real distinctive mark, that's when you can dry that layer first and then come back into it. So you can see I haven't painted the whole area one flat tone. I am going lighter where it is lighter on my reference photo, but it's still darker than I'd want in that final stage. So I'm just blocking that colour in, just building up these underlayers, and because I'm not mixing everything together, do you see on the palette by the side how I've got lots of different shades, colours, tones? So when I'm then looking for perhaps a slightly different colour, more often than not it's already mixed on that palette, so I'm not mixing in the same piece of paint all the time. So I took some burnt sienna, I wanted to warm this section up. And remember, it's mixing with the paint that's already wet on there, so even though that's quite a vibrant colour, when I put it in there it gets muted down. So we're seeing how it's reacting and blending with the colours already underneath. And not everybody wants real hyper-realism. They don't want to see every little tiny fur, every little hair. And it's up to you at what stage you really want to leave the painting. You know, you can do the whole painting wet and wet and have a more painterly, softer look to it, or you can build those layers and do the final layer wet on dry. Okay, so I'm lightening that mix up even further, so still painting everything wet and wet. And you can see now how I'm turning this flat brush onto his side, or using it flat, all to create different marks. So it's all happening with just one brush at this stage. There's no need to have 3, 4, 5 different brushes for all the different marks. When you know your tools correctly, you know, a single brush can do a lot of different marks. And you can see now I'm putting on these lighter sections, how I'm really starting to paint in the fur direction now, because all these sections are really counting. They're going to be painted over later on with more individual hairs, but a lot of these underlayers are going to show through. So I'm just darkening this section right up now. I want it to be a bit darker, give it a bit more depth, and I'm still doing it all wet and wet, so just using a light stroke, same brush, And so I'm darkening that because I know that I'm going to come in with some lighter strokes and they need to overlap. So you need to not only work from dark to light, but also from the background, where possible, towards the foreground. So you can do that layering. So I've got another brush. It's the same size, I think, but I've got one brush for darks, one brush for lights. So that prevents you having to wash them out or in thinners all the time. So still wet and wet, using a light stroke, pulling towards me. You can see how I'm giving the impression now of more clumps of fur. Some real texture coming into it. And that'll be the base, the groundwork then for the individual hairs. And it means that I haven't got to paint every little tiny individual hair to get the impression of fur. And that's what I'm after, an impression of it. If you paint every individual tiny bit, it can be really rigid looking. It can look like a cardboard cutout. So now you can see I'm putting almost pure white on, but because it's blending with the already wet paint underneath, it's still changing that colour slightly, which is exactly what I want. And if you use a light touch, it's really surprising how much fur you can overlap without the colours becoming muddy as well. So once I've done this, I'm then going to let it dry overnight, and that's the stage when I would then come in with all those fine details and individual hairs. Hope you've enjoyed that video, and if so, I got lots more on my YouTube channel. And don't forget, the only way not to miss out on any new videos is to click the subscribe button. On my website, I've got full-length feature videos, I've got reference photo CDs and ebooks, and also the new Easy Trace line art tool. So hope to see you either on my YouTube or my website jasonmorgan.co.uk. See you all again real soon.